Good evening, or good morning, or good afternoon, whatever time you are watching us. Welcome to Migraine Canada's Ask Your Pharmacist webinar. We started this webinar a few months ago to answer your questions that are related to migraine, and we wanted to bring subjects and uh, uh, more information for you to help you manage migraine for you, your family, your loved ones. And today it gives me great pleasure to have Amy Graham. Amy is the director for the Advocacy Champ, and she is the director of Migraine at School. We will
Mhm.
be talking about children, migraine, school, and most importantly, it's the summer at last, and we're
Ugh.
going to be sending our kids to camp, and we would like to know how can we support our children who are living with migraine in camp, at school, and throughout the summer. Welcome, Amy.
Heba, hello. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here and talk to you about something that I am very passionate about. This is the Migraine at School initiative is by far, I think, the favorite part of my job.
I think always working with children is and helping children is
Yeah,
also the best part
yeah,
of
I agree.
our lives. And Champ, what is Champ?
So CHAMP is the Coalition for Headache and Migraine Patients. I like to describe it as sort of the umbrella organization over a multitude of migraine and headache organizations that we bring together so that we can collaborate here in the United States.
And Migraine at School?
So Migraine at School is an initiative that was started by CHAMP in partnership with the Danielle Byron Henry Migraine Foundation. It sort of started in a committee that was a part of CHAMP. There was a committee that was put together to discuss how do we reduce stigma attached to migraine. And in the very first meeting, everybody in the room said, well, we should be working with children. If we work with children and we can destigmatize migraine with a younger generation, we could, in a generation or two, completely eliminate the stigma attached to this disease. And then it didn't take long before it was much less of a conversation and it became its own sort of thing. Like it became an initiative. The Daniel Byron Henry Migraine Foundation, they were founded after their daughter, sister, after living for years with chronic migraine, died by suicide, and turned their pain into sort of changing and making the world a better place. So they joined forces with CHAMP, and together we run Migraine at School.
I know the story of Danielle, and
Mhm.
um, it I for me, I think not one more child should have to
That's
go
exactly
through
right.
what Danielle
Mhm.
went through. And I would love to have one more, possibly one more webinar to talk about mental health
Mhm.
and migraine, um, and to channel all this sadness and the loss into something as beautiful as helping others, and make sure that no other child has to go, or no other family has to go through this, um, is something that is very, very close to my heart as well.
Mhm.
If we can help one person,
Yep.
that makes all the difference in the world, because that one person is someone's child, is someone's brother, sister, son, partner. And mental health and migraine. Um, I have people who tell me, don't talk about it because we're not weak. We're not, uh,
Mhm.
we don't want us to be seen as the whining, as the ones who are really, really weak. We are strong. We are fighting. There's migraine fighters everywhere.
Mhm.
But we know that mental health cannot be maintained if you're in pain. It's
Mhm.
not about strength. It's about how much it affects your life, and your ability to cope becomes less if you're in constant pain. I think we need another one, Amy, that is just on this subject. But
I totally agree.
tonight we're going to talk about migraine at school. and how children, starting early with educating children about migraine, creates an environment and creates a culture where migraine is better understood,
Mhm.
but also provides the child who lives with migraine today with a more supportive uh,
Mhm.
environment and people around them. So, how does migraine at school do this? Did you go to schools with, how do you do this?
There are many ways that we do this. And yes, we do work directly with schools, whether it is us that are part of this sort of leadership team. We also have a large team of what we call Migraine at School ambassadors. That's our sort of grassroots organizing group. And we send them out into their own communities to connect with schools, school districts. But we're also talking recently about sort of thinking outside the box. It doesn't have to be a school. You know, it could be any place that where children gather. So we have an organization in St. Louis, Missouri, that works with at-risk, underprivileged children at a girls and boys club, and they've adopted the Migraine at School program. You were talking about, you know, like it's summer. Like all of our kids now are moving out of school and a bunch of them are moving into summer camp. There is no reason that summer camps can't also sort of be incorporating the Migraine at School tools into what they're doing for their kids as they're taking care of them during these hot months.
So maybe we go back one step behind and talk about how can a parent know if the child has migraine?
So it's sort of, you know, you want to think about migraine can look different depending on what age your child is. You know, in our younger children, what you really want to be looking out for is you want to be looking out for maybe some stomach issues or nausea, vomiting. My youngest has abdominal migraine, and I remember like the first time, you know, it's like they had the stomach flu, but then it went away really fast, you know. And when I think about my oldest, you know, you get the stomach flu, there's that sort of 24, 48-hour cycle. You get it, you can't really eat anything, you know, you eat like applesauce in your toast, but with my youngest, it's like it again, it would look like the stomach flu, and then they would be fine and they'd be able to eat. And then 4 days later, they would be throwing up again. So sort of keep an eye out for, you know, is your child having stomach aches? Are they vomiting in what is clearly not connected to an illness? That doesn't mean that there can't be head pain, and they can't also have you know, headache being a symptom of migraine. But you know, until they're a little bit older, you know, that abdominal stuff is a part of the story as well. Then once you get into adolescence, you're going to start seeing some of the symptoms that we as adults are familiar with when it comes to migraine. You know, do you have a headache that lasts, you know, longer than your typical headache? Is it not related to any sort of tension in any way? Do you have other symptoms that come along with that headache? You know, I in particular, with my migraine, I sometimes feel like I have a fever. I get really nauseated. The Any sort of scent or smell I just almost can't even handle it. People have, you know, aversion to bright lights. So any of those extra sort of those extra symptoms, if you are seeing that along with the headache, it's time to start tracking and recording these instances so that you can maybe see a pattern and the possibility that it may be migraine.
And in your education for schools and for parents and
Mhm,
for children,
mhm,
do you use different tools to communicate with different audiences or
mhm.
different people? Like the language we use with a child is definitely different. So what kind of tools do you provide? And if someone wants to be an ambassador, I know that's how I found out about migraine at school, is because I saw this and I was like, I want to go to schools and tell them, because if we say that one of 10 children
Right.
actually live with migraine, how come we don't see them? How come it's an invisible condition?
Mhm,
Like, we know that. But how
mhm,
come in my kids' class, I've never heard of a child living with migraine? Is it because they were not aware themselves? Is it
mhm,
because the school did not tell the other kids? Or
mhm.
what do you think?
Well, and I don't know what the percentages are in Canada, but I know here in the United States that, we have a very large percentage of people living with migraine that are undiagnosed.
Yes.
So, right now there are 42 million Americans living with migraine, but like 50% of those people are not diagnosed with migraine. Then you sort of throw it back to childhood and how many of our 10% of school age children, 28% of adolescents, how many of those are undiagnosed and they're not being treated where, they're being dismissed or, oh, it's just a headache or it's like, well, this student comes in and complains, during gym class every day and they say they have a headache, but they probably just don't want to have to run when really it may be the activity that is triggering the migraine attack.
That becomes a
So,
life story, doesn't it?
yep,
It starts with children, where every time they say, "I don't want to do something," people think they're just faking
trying to get
it,
out of
or
it.
right?
Right.
And even with adults, we see in the media that
Mhm.
always it's a woman or someone who calls in to work and says, "Well, I have a headache. I'm not feeling well." And then they go out and they have a Ferris Bueller's day out kind of
Right.
day.
Which it's like, keeping in mind too, I think about my own migraine and depending on what activity it is that I'm doing, I can either power through that with my migraine or I can't. So if I am out gardening on a 90, Fahrenheit degree day, I may not be able to do that. But if it is maybe a cloudy day and it's really pleasant out, well, even with the same amount of head pain and slight nausea, I may be able to do my activity. It's sort of keeping in mind that, if we provide the accommodations to people living with migraine, we, the people with migraine, can show up in amazing ways.
Yes.
Like, don't underestimate us and don't underestimate the kids with migraine. It's about making sure that they have what they need in the classroom and they need at summer camp or they need at their after school program that will allow them to have the best experience that they can have.
You have this beautiful video on your website. So if you are listening to this, please, please, please go to Migraine at School website and look at this beautiful video with a young child. She is talking about how she knows it's a migraine. When does she call the
Mhm.
parent? And is this part of the education that you provide?
So yeah, so we talked about like what it is that we do to help educate and who are we educating and how does that look different? So right now we have our three primary audiences. We have our students, the kids, we have our parents, and then we have our educators. I always like to say that our educators are anybody that's at the school. That it's not necessarily just the teacher, it's the teacher, it's the administrators at the school, it's the custodian, it's the wonderful person that works at the front desk at the school that knows everybody and knows everything that's
Yes.
happening. All of these people are on the front lines of helping our kids with migraine. So depending on which audience it is, our materials are crafted for that audience. Um,
I saw beautiful. I don't know if you have materials you want to show us.
sure.
I saw beautiful resources, and I was like, this should be something that on the first day of school, a parent walks in with something to show if it's the first time that they are communicating with school.
So I am attempting to click. Like it's definitely uploaded. I'm hitting present.
Here we
Oh,
go.
there
I
we
have
go. There
it.
we go.
Can
So
you can you move it?
So here we go. So these are
Yeah.
just, the beginning of my presentation. I sort of talk a little bit about who CHAMP is, which we already did, who the Danielle
And this is
Foundation.
Danielle as well, right?
Yeah, you can see
So
the
shout
pictures.
out to the Danielle Foundation for
Yes,
the
they're
great work that they're doing. Thank you very much.
amazing, amazing organization. What a beautiful family. The sort of, just changing the purpose of their life. What a wonderful way to honor Danielle's memory. So they're just really very special people. Then, so we have, like you said, we have the tools for parents. And what we like to start with is for parents, it's about educating what is migraine and what are the things that you maybe need to know, educating yourself about the disease. Because again, as us in the migraine world know, it is not just a headache. There's so much more attached to it. It is a complex neurological disorder. Um, Helping parents understand that to take this seriously, taking it seriously can maybe be the difference between chronification and a child staying episodic.
Yes.
We help parents understand that they're not alone, trying to connect them to other parents that have migraine, encouraging them to get the help that their child needs, talking to a healthcare professional. And then the other symptoms that come along with migraine, as I mentioned before, understanding that, again, if your child is getting headaches regularly and you see these other symptoms, it's really likely that they have migraine and you need to talk to a doctor about it.
I
So,
think the one that comes out, and that is, I think it's the reason why we mistake it or we just don't understand it, is the abdominal. My tummy hurts.
mhm.
That's what your child says. My tummy hurts, my tummy hurts,
Stomach
and my
hurts,
tummy. And you ask them, what did you eat? That's the first thing we do. What did
exactly
you eat?
right. What did you eat? Did you have candy today? It's like, did you eat too many sweets? Well, did you not eat enough of your lunch? Are you hungry? Yeah, you sort of and I know that I'm probably guilty of that as well with my own
We all
kids.
are,
Like, oh, you're
I guess.
fine, you're fine. Like, go play, go do whatever. Um, but it's recognizing if it's consistent and a pattern, like if you're starting to see it more regularly, um, especially if there's vomiting. Like if you like that, and I'm not saying that there always is vomiting, sometimes it is just a stomach ache. But again, if your child is having what looks like the stomach flu, but it's clearly not the stomach flu, start paying attention to that. Keep a diary. We're all told, again, anybody that's watching this that has migraine knows all about keeping a journal and a diary and tracking your days and your symptoms and the severity of your attacks. Paying attention to what's going on with our kids, like that is crucial when we go in to talk to a healthcare professional.
Absolutely. And um, the thing about children is that if you start early enough to
Mhm,
teach them these skills, it's easier when they're older. So the earlier we start, the easier
mhm,
it's going to be for them. This is a condition that doesn't go away, doesn't just disappear. It's there to stay,
mhm.
and it might change. It has that pattern that keeps on changing. Sometimes it gets worse, sometimes it gets better, but it's
Right.
there. So the earlier they are into listening to their bodies and listening to their symptoms and knowing what to do, the easier it's going to make their lives. I think that's the beauty of starting early with children.
No, absolutely. It goes back to the what can we do to prevent chronification? It is a lot easier to prevent migraine from becoming chronic than getting us from chronic back to episodic.
True.
Um, yeah, so the sooner we can manage and care for and make changes that maybe we need to make, that can make all the difference. So part of this graphic too that we have for parents, um, we sort of just have then some things that you can do, with your kids. Like what are some lifestyle changes? Like here are some steps, the steps that you as a parent or a caregiver, what can you do? Here in the United States, We have what is called a 504 plan or an IEP plan, and that means that you officially have legal rights to get what you need accommodation-wise from our school system. I would imagine that there is something similar in Canada. I know that there's something similar in the UK, that that you probably have something that you are officially sort of getting that stamp of approval. Yes, that my child is allowed to have these 5 things, at school, and you can't say no. Like, whether it's having a water bottle, or they're allowed to remove themselves to a quiet space for a bit. um, you know and again, that's a very overwhelming thing as a parent, just like, where do I start? Like, how do I know what accommodations like we should be asking for? So we try to make that easy. Anybody in any country can use this. Like, this is just a list. It's like, this is a good place to start. It's like, here are some possible things that you may ask for your kid. And from this list, you may think of other things, like, because each child is an individual, each child has their own needs. What my child needs may not be the same as what your child needs. This is a great place to start, though, because again, it's sort of an overwhelming process, especially when you're having to jump through the red tape of doing something like getting an official sort of plan in place with the school district. So
I
we
mean,
like,
I love that we have a checklist because I don't think it exists. We haven't worked on it with Migraine Canada. With Migraine Canada, we are providing resources for parents.
Mhm.
This checklist is something that is very, as you said, it doesn't matter what the name is. These accommodations, our children are the same wherever they are in the world, and we are very proud in Canada to be able to walk into a school and explain what the situation is and ask for the accommodations. But it's a big list. So how do you know which one do you need? You
Yeah,
need
I
for
mean, you look at this list and you think about your own child. Like, I could look at this list and I know, like, I think about my oldest, who does live with migraine and had migraine as they were moving through middle school and high school, and extended time to take tests. My kid would not have needed that. That is something that would not have been something they maybe would have needed. But, you know, maybe being able to go to school a little bit later, where you don't have, you sort of have that first hour is more of an open hour, because like their sleep schedule. So I mean, I think it's really going through and looking at who your kid is and what makes sense for your child, and where you should be asking for maybe some of these accommodations. There may be only 3 of these on this list that really apply to your own kid, and there may be 4 more that are on this list that you think about. That's what you ask for, but it's a
and
place to start.
sorry, but would it make sense that maybe you think it's the 3, and then if you find there's one more, you still can go in and
Mhm.
say, well, these are working very well, but can we try also to add this
Of
to
course.
the list of things or to the accommodations that we require, and see if that improves, or that improves the quality of life or the performance, or even how
Mhm.
comfortable they are at school, because they need to feel um, at ease in school without feeling that they are basically being, or without feeling awkward about being the child who needs to go out of the classroom
Right.
because of this.
I would say yes. Like, obviously, there, you always can go back and ask for, alterations on whatever the plan is. I would also, like anything else in life, put more on there than maybe you think you'll need, because the child may never need to ask for it, but if it's on the list, then it's already there. So go ahead and add anything you think might be necessary.
Okay.
I also think part of, if Migraine at School is partnered with, a school, like, these are, this is something that sort of exists, and then what our hope is that when a child, say, needs to leave a classroom to go lay down for 30 minutes in a dark room, that becomes less stigmatized, because it's an open conversation about migraine. It's like, oh, that's right. Well, my sister has migraine too. Or because you look at the number of people that have it, I can't imagine that there's anybody that doesn't know somebody that has migraine. Just the more we talk about it and
Yes.
the more we're discussing it. And that's the great thing about like 6-year-olds. They don't care. It's like, if like Bobby gets to leave to go, like, well, like, like their head is doing something, or they're feeling like an abdominal migraine attack coming on and they need to excuse themselves. And, like that age, like the other kids are going to be like, oh, that's so cool.
Yeah.
And
Possibly.
it changes the way we see something, as opposed to, you and I as adult women. Now, if I need to excuse myself, I feel a sense of shame. And other people are going to judge that in a way that like little kids just don't. They just are so open and accepting, and which is why I think it's just so important for us to be having these conversations when they're young, because it's going to change how they think about it as adults.
And
So,
these adults are going to be your partner, they're going to be your boss at work, they're going to be your colleague.
yep,
So the earlier they're exposed to this, possibly will make them a better person to interact with if you are living with migraine in the future as
exactly.
well.
Exactly right. Because I think about, you think about like, these resources exist to help the children living with migraine, but what is the trickle effect? And that sort of throwing the pond in the stone of the kids who don't have migraine, but they, had a better understanding of their classmates. And then again, they grow up, they become the boss, they become the coworker, and they just know that this is a part of life. Like, that there's just always like, there are people who have migraine, and this is how we help them. So I think that makes a huge difference. So this is part of like what, like what we do like to share with the parents. We also work with the educators to, if we can screen children to identify kids who may have migraine. We have another piece that we like to send home to the parents, which is kind of a cheat sheet to take to your healthcare professional. I know that it can be really overwhelming when you go in to see your doctor or your nurse practitioner, and you have a very limited amount of time, and you just you need to very quickly say what you need to say. This cheat sheet can be used no matter what. Like, just if you're starting to recognize that your child may have migraine, sort of printing this out, filling it out, and then taking it with you when you take your child in for their exam. It's a much faster way to say what needs to be said to get that diagnosis that you may need, which is super, super important.
And
So
that's why we need more ambassadors, I guess. Because
exactly
if
right.
you're an
Yes.
ambassador,
It's all about that grassroots movement, because I can call a school in, a city in Washington state, but I don't live there. They don't know me. But if we have somebody, and we do have a wonderful ambassador that lives in Washington state, and, she's going to have so much more power to talk to people at a local level because it's their community. And so, yes, it's like getting those people who want to make a difference locally do that.
lovely. Thank you. I love this one.
So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing so that, that it's just us now.
So I have a question as a migraine pharmacist. What
Mhm.
about medications? What about how do you communicate with school and with caregivers, or how do you communicate around medications that are used? Because a lot of schools say we will not give them their medication, they need to be able to come and do it themselves, or they have to go to the nurse. Some schools don't have a nurse. How do you manage the need for medication for children?
So that, yeah, once you're at a point where maybe your child is taking some sort of medication for their migraine, that is where you would want that to be a part of your accommodation. You want to work that in. You want to make sure that that's part of your plan. Whatever it is that your child needs, whether it is that they're taking some sort of over-the-counter medication or whether they have been prescribed something to treat migraine. I think that, we are aware that there are no pharmaceutical drugs that have been approved yet for children. That doesn't mean that maybe the healthcare professional that you're working with isn't going to work outside the box in one way or another, but just making sure that any treatment that you have come up with a healthcare professional is a part of your plan. So getting a doctor's letter. We have a sample doctor's letter on our website. Anybody can download it. Have the doctor, and it might just say that this student should have access to ibuprofen to take as needed, blank, 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 so the school has that information and you've empowered then your child to do what they need to do. So
approvals for medications differ from one country to the other. Some of the triptans are approved at different ages. So you might want to check what age your child is, what can they take. The anti-nauseants is a big one, I think, and these are approved for all ages. So if they are nauseating at school and they need something for the nausea, then you can do this. I think this brings us to camp, which is what we started to talk about.
Camp, which is my favorite. I love summer camp. When I was in my early 20s, I was a summer camp counselor, and I still talk to people that I worked with that I just loved. I loved working at camp.
So what would you, first, the anxiety around camp, the anxiety with the child and the anxiety with the parent. How do we go around this? How do we make it less anxious or less creating anxiety for the parent and the child?
I think number one, and again, I don't know how camp works in Canada, but here in the United States, there are all sorts of different kinds of camps. We're
not very different, I think, in that. We have day camp, we have overnight camp.
We have camps that are super focused on outdoor activities. We have camps that you're gonna spend 2 weeks learning how to do hip hop dances. Thinking about
exactly the same.
That. So I think that number one, thinking about your child and their migraine and what camp fits their needs the best. So if you know that your child can be triggered by the heat and a lot of, extreme physical activity, do not put them in a hiking outdoor camp. Think about putting them in a camp where maybe they have access to some indoor activities. I also think, and again, camp is one of those things that we pay for out of pocket.
Yeah, same here.
So you're paying for a service. Do not be shy as a parent to ask for what you want and need for your kid. Ask on the front end as you're signing up, will you be able to make these accommodations? And because again, you're paying them for this service, and they need to make sure that your child is having a decent summer and doing what they need to do for your kid's health. Just tell them, my child has been diagnosed with migraine, and sometimes they're going to need to have access to a place to lay down. They're going to need to stay hydrated. So they're going to need access to a water bottle at all times. I know for myself and my oldest that, we do best if we sort of eat a little bit throughout the day.
Yes.
My child was not shy in any way and was sort of notorious for pulling random food out of their bag in a classroom. My favorite was in the middle of chemistry class. They pulled out a burrito and they just seriously.
But the kids have fun, I guess, if you let them. It's
so, but say it is important that my child is able to eat throughout the day as they need to. I, of course, I always made sure that, here's the food that you have. I would send them with that food. But they're, ask on the front end, make sure that the camp can accommodate, because depending again on what that camp is like, I'm thinking about the camps that are very outdoor activity focused. And it's like, well, I hear what you're saying, but there are days where we're going, like our activity is to go on a 5-hour hike. And how can I make sure that your kid can lay down and rest? Like, that's a safety issue for my other campers. Then that may not be the camp for you.
And we do this very early. I don't know about you in the US, but we start looking at camps around Christmas. We start to talk about them because they run out. Yeah. The other thing that we do that we do talk about is noise in camp, and that's a
Mhm,
big one.
mhm,
So, do you have tips and tricks for how? Because for some reason, children are even, in school, yes, they are nosy, but there's a teacher telling them to be
mhm.
quiet, to listen. But in camp, it's non-stop noise,
Oh, it
which
is
can be a trigger for children, and it could
so loud.
actually.
Like,
Any
you're
tips and
right.
tricks?
I think it's then thinking about what works best for your child. Like, can they wear noise canceling headphones? Does that something that works? Like, I know that I personally can't have headphones on for very long before the pressure of the headphones then starts to trigger something. But there's this sort of like these waxy earplugs that work really well for me. So, like, is that something that works well for them? Does the camp have an ability for the child to remove themselves and be in a quiet space, like an office or something that, um, and again, these are questions that you really want to ask on the front end, because the last thing you want is, to sign your kid up for this camp that maybe they're really excited about, but it's such a bad match for them and their migraine that it's just a miserable experience. So, if they can do noise canceling headphones, if they can do the earplugs, if they have access to a quiet space, because you're right, camp is a lot louder than school. It's just kind of a wild time.
And do we know of any camps that are designed for children living with migraine?
Um, Specific camps for that, not necessarily. I will say that here in the United States, the U.S. Pain Foundation hosts a summer camp, but it's short. It's not the same thing. It's not like 2 weeks or like all summer. It's sort of over the course of a very long weekend. And in fact, they're right there right now. Like, their camp has just started. Where they bring children who are living with chronic pain together to have sort of that traditional camp experience that you wouldn't necessarily be able to have otherwise. Um, Thinking outside the box, looking at a camp, maybe a camp that's art focused, or a camp that isn't very physically, minded, like, not a camp that is about being outside, about camping in the woods, or about, again, doing a lot of strenuous outdoor activities, something that maybe feels like a more quiet activity, like, like there are camps that are specific to, like, reading, and library camps. Like, these might be things that make more sense for a child that has a more severe case of episodic or chronic migraine.
What about swimming?
I mean, I think that again, it's like what works for your child. Both of my children who grew up with migraine, swimming was not an issue for them. So that would not have been a concern for me. Actually, for me personally, so I currently live in the sort of the middle of the United States, but I didn't grow up here. I grew up in California, where anything about, over about 75 degrees was hot. And so, it's already, I think, in the 80s here. And so forget it. Like, the outdoor world doesn't exist for me in the summer unless I'm in the pool. And if I'm in the pool, I'm fine, because just the ability to cool down, I can be outside all day as long as I'm not getting overheated, because getting overheated will completely trigger migraine for me.
I think it's the same here. It's getting hotter and hotter, no
Mhm.
matter where you are in Canada. And indoor swimming camps are becoming more and more popular and more difficult to get into, because again, parents are doing this. Their parents are really working hard to make sure that the summer is covered, because we
Hmm.
still have to go to work.
Yep.
And the kids, you don't want them to miss out. You still want them to be able to, especially if you have a child living with a condition, then, or with a disease, then you don't want them to be sitting at home in the
Hmm.
summer, because there's not enough accommodations for them, or
Right.
because it might be triggering more anxiety for you and for your child, because you don't know how safe it
Absolutely.
is, or how. So is there a list, is there a packing list that you recommend parents to actually have for someone going for living with migraine, or a child
Mhm.
living with migraine going to camp, and they're going to stay for a week, let's say? Is there something different than the regular? Because I remember we had, my children are all grown up now, but we had that list that said number of
Oh
change.
yes, I remember that list of all the things you needed to take, like your sleeping bag and a pillow and, but it was like, like a unbreakable bowl so that they could, and I mean, again, think about your child's personal needs. Obviously, the ability to hydrate. So making sure that they have a water bottle that they're going to use.
Yes.
Um, you know, a cold pack if you can. I mean, that's hard if you're camping for a week. So again, you have to assess whether that does or doesn't make sense for your kid. But
We do have, I can give you a small pharmacist advice here. We do
ooh,
have
yes,
the ones that you break
you break them.
and you put them, and they're instant. They don't need to be frozen. They don't need to be in the freezer. The
So
ice packs that we have in the pharmacy, these are very easy to find. I don't know if some children also like heating pads or
mhm,
something hot. That's also something that we do have, where the ones that, the small
right.
ones that you
Yep.
have in your when you're skiing.
I was gonna
So,
say I have a box of those for
but I have a box of those for when it's really cold in
yeah,
Canada. But the ice packs that you just break and it immediately becomes
right.
cold, I would think that
Yep.
this makes sense. If they don't
Mhm,
use it, they can always bring it back
yep.
if they don't
And
need
there
it.
are other ways, yeah, I think that's brilliant. Like having that sort of that ice pack that they can use in an emergency, having some sort of cloth or bandana that they can get wet that they can sort of put over their neck, and then a handheld fan to sort of cool themselves down when they need to. Again, access to a way to remove noise, whether again it's, again, you want to have a conversation with this camp. Like my child's going to need these things and they are coming with them, whether it's like earplugs or, the noise canceling headphones, some sort of sunglass. Like the sunglasses and the bright light are so important. If they have migraine glasses, great. But sunglasses, when you're outside, I never go outside without sunglasses on, and it makes a huge difference for me.
Yep.
Like I literally, it really doesn't even have to be that sunny, and I have my sunglasses on, making sure that they have those. Whatever that they need to sleep as well as they can sleep. If they have a special pillow that they have to sleep with, or like for me, like when I was really little, I had my binky, so like I would sleep better if I had my binky, which is my blanket. Like making sure that they have the tools that they need to get the best sleep that they can have. And then an understanding of when they can eat and snacks. So if you can send extra snacks, whether it's some sort of like fruit bars or granola bars or something, trail mix, so that, again, if they need to be eating between meals as well, that they have access to the food that they need. And
I
again,
really like this, because I know also a lot of camps say you cannot bring food. But if my child needs a protein bar because they need higher protein
yep,
because of migraine, then it makes sense to communicate this and ensure that there's understanding that they're not getting sweets, they're not getting treats that the others can't get.
absolutely. I'm not sending a chocolate bar. I'm sending, like you said, a protein bar. And again, having those conversations on the front end, um, so that you're going to get those accommodations. You're paying for this camp. You're paying for a service. Your child has a really complex neurological disorder. And so you're just asking for what they need to be at the same level of healthy as the other kids are. That's not asking too much. That's fair.
And I think something I learned from my kids, I didn't go to camp, as you can imagine. I didn't go to camp, but when I sent my kids to camp, my son became best friends with the nurse. So they develop, I think, skills as well to be
Mhm.
able to advocate is most important for children, is them becoming advocates for their own needs and being able to communicate and find people and bring allies
Yep.
for themselves. So if the counselor was not really supportive of what my son needed, then he had the ally in the nurse who understood better and who was able to communicate a little bit better with the counselor and give them that, cold, dark place. They can lie down in the nurse's
Yeah.
office. And she was loving and cuddling, and
Yeah.
she was really, really providing them with the support that they needed. Um, and that is something that I think we possibly need to build with our children as well, to be
Mhm.
able, not only the parent needs to communicate what they need, but maybe the child. Do you have advice as to how a parent can empower their child to advocate?
Sure. Yes. I mean, actually, it is one of the things that we try to do with our students is, learning to speak up, learning to advocate. And I would say that that's something that, having those conversations at home with your children, like, you get to speak up. You get to say you're in pain. You get to take care of yourself, honor what your body is telling you, and letting them know that you have their back. I mean, I would tell, I would like not even question. Like if I got to say I got a phone call from camp or school and that, they were saying that Chloe, left the classroom and, we need to talk to you about this. And I found out it was because they had asked that they needed to go get some water and they were told no, and they were told no repeatedly. And then they could feel that like a migraine was coming on. I'd be like, I got you. Like, I'm not going, like, yes, like, I will then push back with the school. Like, well, my child was doing what they needed to take care of themselves, advocating for you, advocating for your need, that
Yeah, and the child is in pain. They're not being difficult.
no,
They
they
are not
no, that is almost always
challenging.
the case. It's like, you know, having that freedom to know that sometimes you just need to stand up for yourself and sometimes you're going to get pushback. The world may push back on you sometimes. That does not mean you're wrong.
Then I think we're getting closer to the end of this. I can talk more and more and more, but if you had to, if you had to choose one thing, or if you wish you knew one thing when your children were younger, um, what would that be? And now you know it, and you're like, no, why didn't anybody tell me? Is there anything that you feel that you needed to know?
I would say that understanding how our mental health impacts our pain and impacts our physical self and giving space to be mentally the strongest we can be, because the stronger we are mentally, the more we can handle the journey of our physical pain. And add on to that, the less that is triggering possible migraine.
Yeah. And I think this idea, there's a lot of anxiety
Mm-hmm.
around, am I going to be able to make it to the birthday party, or am I going to have a migraine? As a child, this might be, in adults, I know it really, really hurts to be sitting there. You're invited, you're
Yep.
excited, and then you're going, will I be able to make it?
Right.
Uh,
Reframe that. Like it's, yes, like I know I'll make plans with somebody. I know there's a chance I'll have to cancel. And at this point I have enough boundaries and I feel strong enough that if it's somebody that doesn't understand, that person doesn't fit into my life now. I know what I need to do for me. So,
but it took years as an adult,
no,
but as a
I
child,
know. Well, I'm
as a
50
child,
years old, so yeah, it took a while to get here.
but as a child, it might be
Mhm.
challenging. It might be also
Absolutely.
embarrassing to say, well, I have a headache. I know
Mhm.
Some of my friends were telling me that sometimes they're worried they people don't invite them anymore, and that's even more amplified for a child
I
if
know.
they are invited and they don't
So
go.
hard.
So
It's such
what advice do you
I mean,
give
it
them?
is. It's such a hard thing to navigate. I mean, the complexities of being a parent and moving our children through childhood is just, it's so much to carry. I think the best we can do is just make space for our kids to feel their feelings and allowing them to sort of understand that it's okay to feel sad, and let's move through that together.
If someone wants to be, and I'm hoping that a lot of our listeners today or our viewers today are gonna be excited about becoming an ambassador, how can someone become an ambassador, and what do they need to do to be an
So it's
ambassador?
super easy. You go to the Migraine at School website. It's just migraineatschool.org. There is a place that you can sign up to be an ambassador. We now have an online training, which takes less than 30 minutes. It may not even take 20 minutes. You do the training. You then are a part of our ambassador program, and then we will be in constant communication, sort of, tips and tricks and how to do your grassroots outreach, where to start. We give you the tools to do all of the work. We even provide you with scripts and, sort of like starter emails, just because, it's hard to know where to start. So it's really easy to sign up, and you do not have to live in the United States to be a Migraine at School ambassador. That is not, yeah, we
And
have
that is
people
the
in most
beauty.
countries.
That
Yes.
is the beauty of this. We need ambassadors all over the world, wherever you are. If
Hmm.
you can be an ambassador, I think a child is a child wherever they
Yep,
live.
I
A
agree.
school looks the same. The
Yep,
language might be different. And that's why we also need ambassadors from around the world so that
yep,
they are able to use these messages and
yep.
make them sound like what they need to sound in their local um, societies or their local um, schools.
I agree.
I have just put the ticker in the bottom for migraineatschool.org. Migraine Canada is also providing resources. We have now a brand new guide for medications that can be used for children. Please go there and look for information on what medications can be used in children. And Amy, I can't say thank you enough. This has been educational for me, and I hope that our viewers today have also gotten some ideas. Please send us your questions, comment, send us questions, repost as much as you can, and share this beautiful resource that is Migraine at School, that we are very, very happy to partner with at Migraine Canada. And we hope that your child is going to have an amazing summer, and that we have given you an idea or two that will help them enjoy their summer. Thank you very much, Amy.
Heba, thank you so much for allowing me to come on and talk to you. Thank you to Migraine Canada. My Canadian husband is really excited that I'm talking to you guys. So, half of our household is Canadian. It's such an important topic, and we just really appreciate that, that we were able to sit and have this conversation with you. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a very, very good day and enjoy the summer.
Wonderful. You too.